Hello and welcome to Rico's virtual color webinar series. My name is Toby Saufeld and I'm responsible for Rico USA's Color Management Services organization. I'll be your host for today, and I wanted to personally thank you for joining our second session of the day, Design for Print. Now, as pretty much everybody knows, business is quite a bit different today than it was just a couple months ago. Like, I think we all feel this. So we at Rico, I've taken a look at how we can possibly help. We landed on a few topics around color management, because color management, or good color management, is one of those things that can really help you become more effective and more efficient at how you work. And really, for many businesses, tightening up the bottom line and eliminating some waste of time and material is more important than ever before right now. So imagine color management as a chain of events that goes from the inception of an idea to the final product. Design is one of those links in that chain, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. It's going to be all about design for print specifically. A couple of logistical items before we get started. I've muted all of the lines, so if you wanted to ask a question, you would need to use the WebEx chat feature. If you cannot see the chat, there's inside the WebEx app, web application, there's a little conversation bubble. If you click that, you should get a chat window. And you can send your question to either everyone, if you feel comfortable to do so, or just send them to me, the host. I think should be one somewhere on the top of the list there. Just send them to me. I'll collect all of the questions throughout the presentation. I promise we're going to have some time at the end to answer those questions. And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to John. John will be your presenter for today. Let me just find you in the list. There's somebody with a very similar name here. There you go. John Vina, presenter. So I just pass it over to you. You might still need to share your screen. There you go. Okay.
Sure.
Yep, I can see it.
All right.
John, it's all yours.
Danke, Herr Saufeld. Welcome, everyone else. I know we got a big international crowd, or at least we have on some of these other calls. So I wanted to put at least a little German out there and prove that I can speak more than English. I can also speak 17 words of German.
Sounded very good.
All right, everyone. So my name is Jonathan Vina, and today I'm happy to discuss a topic very close to my heart, and that's design for print. So who am I and what do I do? I'm a Rico color management consultant. And as a consultant, it's my job to work with customers such as yourselves. We implement strategies, processes, so that you can achieve the best color while hopefully eliminating the headache. The success of those strategies and processes comes down to my ability to educate. So I hope you guys find something interesting enough today to maybe travel further down the rabbit hole, either on yourself or with the help of Rico. I am also a ID Alliance certified G7 expert, and I'm a former graphic designer and 3D animator myself. I put my LinkedIn on there. It seemed to work for the last session. A whole bunch of people reached out to me, which was great. So I apologize, as somebody who's going to be talking about design, we got a little bit of a pixelated picture of me, but I wanted the same LinkedIn photo that I had because there is another Jonathan Vina that lives about 20 miles from me in New Jersey. So I didn't want anybody to be confused. That is the link. That is a picture that will pop up. And also my email address. So if anybody wanted to email me any additional questions, find out any more information on a topic, or just reach out and say hello, you're certainly free to do that as well. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Okay, so Toby mentioned just a few moments ago the color management chain. So the color management chain, like Toby described, a chain of events that ultimately happens between a customer requesting something and a customer getting that print or that item back, whatever the case may be. So typically when problems in color happen, Resources and efforts are very often spent in this area, the production area. And that's for very good reason. There's usually a lot of issues to clean up in the production end of color management. So, machines not behaving, bad color management processes in general, maybe misunderstandings, all sorts of things. But today, we're going to be talking about how sometimes, maybe 100% or at least partially our fault, we can have some issues in the design stage. And to use this chain analogy, as we start the process here, if we're not using best practices, we can ultimately create issues that compound as they get further down this chain into production, and ultimately satisfying the customer at the very end. Okay, we're just going to be focusing on how to properly communicate color during the design stage. So if anybody's sad or bummed, we're not going to be talking about good design versus bad design, things like making sure somebody's face isn't looking off the edge of the page, or poor color combinations like this particular red and gray that can cause eye strain. Today is purely color management centric, to clarify that. Okay, so we're ready to start creating. Step number one is we need to think about, do we want this to be in RGB or CMYK? So let's say this design is going to be part of a print campaign as well as an email blast. To me, designing an RGB in that instance would be the logical choice, so that we can take advantage of the broad range of colors that monitors and our cell phones use. So we get the maximum kind of amount of pop there. But simultaneously, Adobe Creative Cloud will allow us to simulate on occasion what the CMYK version of that piece is going to look like. So if there is going to be a print aspect to this multi-channel campaign, with a little multitasking and a little 3D thinking, we can kind of verify as we go along that it's still going to look good in print. If our design is only going to live in print, and this, I don't want to say this could be controversial, but this could be, a lot of designers can have a lot of opinions on this, and they're certainly all valid. And this one is clearly just mine. But if our design is only going to live in print, my natural instinct has always been to design in CMYK. That way we're viewing colors that we know we can print when it gets to that production stage. One thing that's kind of always stuck with me is somebody's mentioned years ago in my career, that anything designed well, looks good in CMYK, is going to look good on an RGB monitor display of some sort. But not everything that's designed great for RGB is going to look good as CMYK. So that's why it's my opinion, when we're designing our pieces that are going to be print only, to me, it's a better idea to use CMYK. Okay, so RGB versus CMYK. So this is backing up for a little bit for anybody that's maybe, I don't know, new to design or new to print. I wanted to show you guys, if you've never seen it, this is RGB and CMYK plotted out. Specifically right now, we're looking at CMYK. So that hexagon there is a generic CMYK that will say a good printer with a nice, good coated paper. It's in good working order. All the colors that a CMYK device will produce. This larger space is that of RGB. So this, and again, we'll just say for generic sake, is about all the colors a monitor or an iPhone or an iPad or an Android, whatever it might be, a television screen, all the RGB colors it's going to be able to produce. So a much larger color space when dealing with RGB. So with that said, we're going to do our kind of first little field trip into, I use Illustrator. So if anybody uses InDesign, I'm not showing anything that can't be done in InDesign. In fact, it's in the same spot. If we got anybody that works 100% in Photoshop, I'm going to briefly show something in there too that kind of goes a little extra to this. But I'm an avid Illustrator user. I've always kind of enjoyed that way more than InDesign. For all you book publishers out there, I certainly understand where InDesign can beat up on Illustrator, but this is my preferred method of choice. Okay, so I've got a file here designed in RGB. So let's say this was going to go to print. We could just send it down, create a PDF, whatever the workflow is, and print it. A better, and what I mentioned before about being able to simulate CMYK on our screen. So a better avenue would be to do that occasionally and see kind of how this is going to lay out. If maybe this is going to go on the website and it's also going to be in a brochure. So if I go up to view and I come down to proof colors and I click that on, hopefully everybody's able to see that on their screen. This background got much more dull and kind of washed out and grayish looking. That is because we were taking advantage of some of those greens and blues that a CMYK printer just cannot hit. And that's okay. We definitely knew that. But where I wanted to show you guys specific of this piece, and I'm going to go back and turn my proof color off again. So we're going back to just RGB. Notice this kind of sunset really doesn't change very much at all. So what happens when using this workflow, if it's going to be for print only, this is kind of, again, just to further hammer home the point that I like designing in CMYK if it's going to be for print only. We're getting a big gap now in between the kind of the values and the saturation of the sun in the background. That's, you know, it's magnifying when we go to CMYK. So if this was going to be a piece that was going to live in CMYK only, I probably would have designed it there and I wouldn't have had that issue. I might have selected some different colors for my sunset here. Just one small thing I wanted to show you guys. And also this one, because some other things that can happen, and forgive me, this is a pretty crude design with kind of some ugly colors if you ask me, but I wanted to show you one of another pitfalls of designing an RGB and then going to print. If I go up into my view now and I set my proof colors, notice what happens to our greens. They become pretty much the same exact green color. So as a designer, if I didn't have at least some working knowledge of this, when this got to print and I got this piece back, and I would say, what did you guys do? You did something wrong. So, you know, take it upon yourself to just understand the differences between these two you know, different methods of color, RGB versus CMYK, and as we go along here. Okay, so let's go back into our presentation. Okay, so what typically happens? The following statement is the product of 4 years of art school, years of 2D design work, and 11 plus years at Ricoh. Most designers will typically kind of go no further than that. And I say most because not all. And if you do what I'm about to talk about, and you're in what I consider the minority at this point, then good for you. Keep doing what you're doing, an A+. Most designers are just going to come in, set up their artboard size. They're going to make their RGB or CMYK selection. They're going to click OK, and they're going to start their masterpiece. What they might not know or don't really, sure, we'll say care to look under the hood any deeper and why some color issues might be happening, is there's actually many different types of RGB and CMYK color spaces, which is what we're going to get into now. So CMYK versus CMYK. Okay, so we're back to our gamut viewer here, and we're looking at this two-dimensionally, so all the colors, CMYK. This particular one we're looking at right here represents SWAP, or by its full title, US Web-Coded SWAP v2. And the reason I'm showing you this one is because by default in Creative Cloud, this is our CMYK working space. So if we've never gone any deeper into the settings in Creative Cloud, this is what particular color space we're designing in. And it's good. SWAP has been around for a long time and is a universally adopted color space. Sorry for any of our, I mentioned we have some people from Asia and Europe and maybe all over the world on this call. I apologize, I'm very North American centric. I deal a lot color management here in the United States, so this is typically what I'm seeing here. Yours might vary slightly, but principles are all the same. This larger gamut that I'm showing you represents Grackle. So if you may or may not have heard of Grackle, it's over the years become the gold standard of commercial print. So what that means is press operators, press shops out there are targeting this particular color space. Their proofers are more often than not set up to produce this color space. In the digital world, our toner and our inkjet machines are coming from the factory with a source profile set to simulate this color space. So as a designer, if I'm designing in Swap and I've got a printer that's printing in Grackle, I'm not really doing too much harm to myself here. Except if you consider the fact that we might be leaving a little color on the table harmful. As designers, who doesn't like to design with more colors possible? So I typically, in my designs, I've gone in and changed my CMYK source profile in my Creative Cloud applications to Grackle 2013 to kind of better match what might be on the receiving end of this work. So where do we do that? Color settings in Adobe CC. So if you go up into the color settings, you'll get a color dialog box. In each of, we'll just talk about the main applications right now, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. They all look slightly different from each other. There's different development teams at Adobe that create the different applications. But the same ability to change color spaces is there, as well as something of equal importance, deciding what you want to do if you import or open something that doesn't match the color space that you have set up. So, for example, if we have if there's a bunch of designers on my floor, we're all sharing work, or different people are creating different elements. If we're all in different color spaces, if we don't have maybe warnings on to ask what we want to do when we open those things, as we pass that work around between us, we're actually creating unwanted color shifts. It's not anything that's going to be drastically noticeable, like green turning to purple, but we are going to be affecting those numbers. We're going to be affecting that color. And again, there's one of those things I talked about before that can compound before it ever gets to production. So the way we can kind of handle that is we can save these settings, give them custom names, we can share them with each other, or we can use Adobe Bridge, which is actually a really nice feature that's underutilized, where we can assign these color settings to all of our Creative Cloud applications all at once. So we don't need to go into all of our different programs and set them. So I want to show you guys exactly how to do that. For that, we're going to go back into Illustrator. And we're going to come up. Okay, so back to our dinosaur drawing here. If we go up into Edit, and this is in the same spot for Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. If we go up into Edit and we come down to Color Settings, that's going to open that dialog box. So you'll notice I've defaulted it back to the Adobe standard settings when you install the application. As some of us know who are using Creative Cloud, things are constantly changing and evolving. That's kind of how the subscription model is going now. New releases of this come out all the time, it seems like. So things are subject to change. But if we go in here, if I drop down the RGB section, you can see a whole bunch of industry standard RGB settings I have. If you wanted to get a little more advanced, I actually have a calibrated display that I can load back in as a source profile, use just the colors that my monitor is capable of producing. And in the CMYK, we get a whole bunch more options. So again, a whole bunch of different standards from different places, really around the world. There's some Japan color in here. There's European standards, FOGRA. But if I were to change it to Grackle 2013, for example, maybe I want to turn on all my warnings. So if I open something that's not Grackle 2013, what is it gonna do? Is it gonna prompt me to make some kind of decision about how I want to handle that? I can go ahead and I can save these settings, like I mentioned, and I can pass them along to different people in my department, or I can open them up in different applications. What's nice is if I've got two pre-made ones saved in here, if I just go into Bridge, I open Adobe Bridge, and I come in here, same spot, so edit color settings. I can scroll down. I have those 2 custom ones saved in the directory where this is looking. I can go ahead and pick one. So let's grab this one, Vina Crackle 2013, so I know what the source CMYK is. And I put D55, so I know that's my calibrated monitor for D55 white point. And I hit apply. So now I can close out of Bridge. And if I'm back in my application, now for some reason, and this is one of those things about Creative Cloud, these releases just come out. Sometimes they're a little finicky until they solve it in some kind of patch. If I go into color settings, it's there. So it pulled in my setting. Still says unsynchronized. So I found the way to get around this, and this is the newest release of Creative Cloud. Simply cancel it out and open it up again. So now I'm back into color settings. It's got the RGB set that I picked. It's got the CMYK that I picked, and it says we're synchronized. So my Creative Cloud applications are all using these 2 RGB and CMYK, respectively, color spaces. Okay. Back into the presentation. Okay, so because now, if that was news to you about different CMYK and different RGB color spaces, I want to point out to you why that matters. So I've got a PDF, there's a video of a PDF open here. I want you to look at the CMYK breakdown there. So I've just got the pit stop eyedropper, and I'm going to go back and forth when I hit play here and just click on both of those different greens. And hopefully, again, on your screen, you notice that the one on the right is a much bluer green, a little darker in value. But as I click back and forth, the CMYK values are staying exactly the same. So the point of this was to illustrate the fact that if I'm not communicating beyond just CMYK colors, if I'm not communicating the color space that I'm in, my production area might have a hard time knowing exactly what color I'm expecting in the beginning. So I want to show you a little way to kind of further illustrate that point and where it gets people into trouble. So this is a design aspect that I've seen a lot out there and wanted to bring it to the attention in case this is anybody on the call today. Brand guides like this, where they just specify CMYK or maybe in some instances RGB values. I see this a lot when people have this kind of brand color guide that might have been developed in like PowerPoint or something like that. Communicating that those CMYK only values isn't really enough, and this is why. Let's take the most simple color on this screen, and that's the red. So its breakdown is just 0 cyan, 100 magenta, 100 yellow, and 0 black. So in a perfect world where there was no different color spaces out there, just CMYK only, everybody says the same exact CMYK, that's really simple. It's just 100% of those 2 colors, right? But what happens if that then goes to press where my magenta starting point and my yellow starting point are different? Maybe not even that drastically to the eye, but nonetheless are a different starting point. That becomes a problem for this kind of communication because one magenta ink might be different than another magenta ink. I'm sure anybody that's got a press on this call knows that. In the digital world, it's the same. Ricoh magenta is going to be different than Xerox magenta, just the way they're formulated. Not to mention, there could be, there's got to be some kind of tolerance between the inks themselves. It's possible, and again, we're talking about nearly imperceivable things here, but it's possible you could get a batch that's a slightly different magenta, even though you haven't even changed the machine. So when we mix 100% of these 2 colors, we're going to get a different red. So I could send that breakdown of 0, 100, 100, 0 all over the world. And if those prints got sent back to me, I could get theoretically thousands of different reds that appear. So I hope that kind of makes sense on why communicating a color space as well as these colors can be important. One thing that was developed to kind of solve this problem when it comes to brand colors only, spot colors. So a lot of times I'll see, I'll get files from a customer, they want it to print, they have a particular Pantone in mind, they don't use the Pantone color in their file for whatever reason. Pantone was really devised, the Pantone matching system, as a way to help color communication. So the kind of the speaking of color between two people didn't break down. It does have limitations, not necessarily limitations from Pantone, but limitations from our own creating. You might be a designer. Maybe we know our company color is 283, this top blue on the Pantone chart there. We might have our own, we're in the design area. Typically we've got, a fresh Pantone guide. Or maybe we don't even look at it anymore because we just know the color is 283 and we haven't even looked at that guide in a long time. But when we get a production piece back, it's not the same exact color. Well, that's what Pantone is devised to help with, right? The problem being, this is the book they have in the print shop. I see books like this, unfortunately, in the print shops all the time. They were printed in 1976. They've got coffee stains on them. They've been sitting in the sun, so they're starting to yellow. The ink itself is fading or changing in some way because of maybe UV light. Pantone recommends themselves on their website. It's published out there. Replace the guides every 12 to 18 months. If you look at your Pantone guide, somewhere on there, there's kind of like a little born on date that when you open that guide, you put the date down and it recommends you replace that in 12 months because this does happen. So wanted to point that out. Okay, so the next thing to think when designing, what are my limitations on press? So we talked a little bit about, well, a press only has CMYK color. So are we going to design an RGB or CMYK? Maybe we're designing something though that's going to be done in wide format. The wide format world is really taking off right now. And a lot of them are coming with way more colors than just CMYK now. So you might see orange or green or violet. You get all the light colors, things like that. And those are developed to expand the color gamut for wide format print. Typically being signage, you need to capture people's attention. So, somebody that's real savvy could take that color space theoretically and bring it back into Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, and take advantage of those extra colors. Offset with a spot color. Are we designing a piece that's going to be done offset? We know we've got CMYK. Maybe this particular press has a spot for a fifth color station in it, and we can lay down whatever color we want to use, something we need to consider ahead of time. What you guys see over here, this is again our CMYK, just kind of our generic space there. And then all those little dots are the Pantone coded guide. So you can see there's a lot of Pantone colors that are just not achievable in CMYK. So understanding the relationship on, our press limitation, what is going to be acceptable as far as Pantone colors that I'm going to use, or if I'm using ones that are outside of the gamut of the machine, I can't beat up the operator because they couldn't achieve that color. I have to understand what they're going to be able to provide me. Digital now with fifth station, huge. So a whole bunch of the manufacturers now are releasing production toner machines with fifth station capability. Ricoh has one that has neon yellow and neon pink toner, among some other colors. White, and that kind of goes into the last point here, the substrate type. So we need to consider what our substrate is, because as designers, again, that's another tool in our tool belt here to be able to create some interesting pieces. Okay, so calibration matters. I mentioned working in CMYK to view only those colors available to us on press, or I showed you before how we were simulating CMYK from an RGB file. If you really want it to look like an accurate representation of the press run, you'll need a calibrated monitor. So monitors natively produce a much bluer white point than print when viewed under most conditions. So we need to manage that. We need to calibrate to a particular white point if we want. Calibration also helps stop color shift over time. Even Apple monitors eventually shift over time. That's why you'll find a lot of calibration software, or you get in some of the higher end monitors with automatic calibration built into them. It can do it as frequently as every week in order to keep that color consistent and not shifting. Monitors, even on the high end, don't automatically produce accurate color from the factory. And I want to kind of show a little bit of that to you in a fun way here. So this is, my life is color management. I love and enjoy this stuff a lot. So I am constantly taking pictures in stores like this, grocery store, of labels printed, maybe incorrectly. Monitors like this. This was in a Best Buy. So notice, I think we've got a bunch of different brands here. We've got a bunch of different models here, but all a few $100s worth of TV each, all producing very different color from each other. Which one is accurate? I would bet a lot of money that if we're talking, if accurate to us is an industry standard like sRGB or Adobe RGB, none of these are producing accurate color, but they're producing bright, pleasing color, which is typically all we really ask of monitors or televisions right out of the box. Here's another example, but this is all the exact same brand. So these are all Samsung monitors. This was in a Target. Another picture that I took. All the exact same brand, exact same model that they strung together in order to create one larger video that was running on loop in the DVD section. So the two that draw my eye the most is the two up top. You can see the drastic change in skin tone, the red kind of wall in the background of this woman, and as well as that kind of blue section that goes across. These are monitors most likely just from the factory. They opened them up, they hung them together, they produced, projected their image from whatever computer, and this is what they got. So I actually want to pop out before we get into saving. I mentioned before the two color spaces. So we were looking at a 2D representation. I'm going to switch this to 3D, and what we're looking at here, again, so we're looking at specific RGB and CMYK color space right now. This is Grackle 2013. So again, this is what in North America we term as kind of the gold standard print. This is sRGB, which is a very common RGB color space, and also something very close to what my Macintosh computer is producing, right? And I'm on a nice, 3-year-old MacBook Pro here, producing about the same colors as sRGB. So if I do the conversion, if I'm on my computer and I want to simulate CMYK, you'll notice there are some yellows poking out on the top here. So what that means is that a device printing to the Grackle CMYK color space is going to be able to actually produce some yellows that I cannot display on my monitor. What's more interesting, if I turn the opacity on these off, so now they're solid shapes. If I rotate this, what you'll notice is there's actually, a whole bunch of kind of cyan and greens down here that I cannot actually accurately represent on my computer that I can achieve in print. So it's just one of those things to consider when people are trying to get true one-to-one matches between screen and print. There's just going to be some colors that unfortunately on our screen, even once we've calibrated everything, we've got a perfectly printing device, we've got a perfectly calibrated monitor, we've got our Creative Cloud application set up correctly, there's still going to be a little bit of difference, particularly in those areas. Fortunately, and that leads me to the point I wanted to make, is there are monitors out there that produce more colors than that. So this is kind of why the Adobe RGB color space was created back in 1998. It produces more colors. It completely, if I turn the opacity off again, it completely encompasses all those CMYK spaces, minus this tiny little sliver of yellow here. So that's why Adobe RGB was developed. The only problem or concern, if you want to get this level of a screen to print match, that's you're getting into the soft proofing world at that point. The cost of your monitors goes up dramatically when you're producing this many colors. So like I said, I mean, this MacBook that I'm on, we all know how much Apple products cost, can still not produce anywhere near the colors Adobe RGB can. So when you're getting into the higher end monitors, NECs, ISOs, it does come at more of a cost. So just something to consider when, how aggressive we want to be on our one-to-one match. Okay. Let's go back into saving. Okay, so again, because we've got a wide variety of kind of whys there for these different features in here in saving, I can't give you just a blanket, this is how you need to save your PDFs, depending on what RIP you're using, depending on what type of printing technology you're going for. There's going to be different requirements for those. A good place to start is at least include your profile, the profile you built it in. So now that you've gone back, you've said, hey, I want to design everything in Grackle 2013. Now that you're doing that, we can include that profile as basically instructions into our PDF. So a great place to start is PDF X. So they're all going to give you that ability to include the tag source profile so that a savvy pre-press person or the print operator can go into that PDF and search for what color space was this designed in. I'm going to make sure I make my correct settings on my print controller or on my plate setter to accurately produce those colors. So I know I'm providing the designer back the color they're looking for. So that's a good place to start. Okay, communication. I think I've used that word a whole bunch throughout this presentation because that's really what we're trying to do here. I want to talk about the final piece of the communication puzzle between design creation and, as designers, what we have in mind versus a print or a proof that we might receive back, and something that's critical in this step. Lighting. Lighting is extremely important. And I think it's even covered in some of the other sessions that if you guys haven't signed up for, please do. Standing and viewing everything in a light booth with standard lighting like D50 or D65 can go a long way towards eliminating communication breakdown. When I try to discuss this sometimes, the first reaction of the person on the other end of that is my customer doesn't view it in a light booth. And I certainly understand that point, and it's fair enough. The point is taken. But there's a lot of benefits to a light booth in the fact that it just standardizes your lighting. So you're not, this person on the right here. So this was in an actual office where people were viewing print. And I'm going to show you on the next screen, I think this kind of all makes sense, why something like that's really not good. The main factor being it's ever changing. As the facilities people come by, they're going to, notice a bulb's out, they're going to throw, whatever replacement fluorescent bulb in there, which might have two different light points. Anybody that's gone to Home Depot and bought, accidentally the wrong, warmth bulb as a replacement in their kitchen or something like that knows that bulbs come in different colors, essentially. In this case, there is one completely out. So this is an ever-changing kind of, it's a non-standardized approach. So that's why a light booth can be important. Not because you can go and say, we only view under consistent D50 lighting, but the fact that we view under consistent lighting. It is going to go a long way to helping you get and actually a necessary step if you do want to do some kind of soft proofing or want a close one-to-one match of screen to print. You are going to need D50 or D65 or something along those lines. But it's the consistency portion. And I want to show you that in a little video I've prepared. So what we're looking at is I'm standing in a light booth. Forgive me, this was months and months ago. I don't remember if I'm standing under D50 right now or D65. But I've got a machine that is profiled and calibrated to that white point as well. So that's what you're seeing, a black square on the top of just 50% K only. And on the bottom, you're seeing the CMY version of that. So the 50-40-40 patch for those G7 folks out there. So watch what happens. I'm going to play this video and watch as soon as I step out of the light booth.
Does all the cut lines hold just drop your cardboard.
All right, so kind of wild, right? If anybody's using REM indicators out there or even know what those are, or looked in the back of their Pantone guides, they'll notice something kind of very similar to this that can basically show you when you're standing under correct lighting. Again, this isn't really necessarily a pitch for, well, you can only achieve accurate color if you're standing under D50 lighting. We can get a print to gray balance for any lighting source. I could make this look great under this light, no problem. But the point being, if I'm the designer that's now brought this piece back to my design area and I'm looking at it and I'm communicating it to the print shop or the press room that is standing under any kind of different lighting, and I'm communicating, this is just the first frame from that video versus the last frame, and I'm communicating to them, your print is way too red. It might not necessarily be anything wrong, it's just our communication breakdown. So a pitch for why lighting becomes extremely important. Somebody would say these prints do not match, but this is the exact same piece of paper, just under two different lighting conditions. Okay, so I don't want to give you guys the hard sell here, but I did want to at least point out that Ricoh does offer services in all these different areas we've discussed. So this was kind of a little, intro into these different areas. Hopefully you got enough of them to maybe, like I said earlier, you can go in and, do some Googling. Or reach out to anybody at Ricoh to get you connected with the proper person. Reach out to me directly. If you're in my area, I'm happy to help. If not, I'm happy to help and get you in touch with the person that does cover your area. But we offer services and monitor calibration. We offer lighting if you want help with that. We offer the setup assistance for Adobe Creative Cloud. Like I said, I'm a graphic designer by trade, so if anybody's on the phone that's a designer, you scare the print shop people a lot, to be brutally honest. And print shop people, some of you might agree with that and admit, yeah, the designers are very scary. I can help bridge those gaps with things like Lunch and Learns. We also offer Pantone guides. I brought that up earlier, so I might as well mention that. Or you can get them directly from Pantone, but we do offer that. So with that, I believe I'm stopping just a few seconds short of the 45 minutes allotted for presentation. So now I guess we'll turn it over to some Q&A.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. Thanks so much, John.
No problem.
Excellent. So we do have plenty of time for questions, and there were a bunch that came in through the chat. If you have additional questions, please continue to use the chat. Either send the questions to everybody or just to me. That's under the send to. That's the host. You could also, if you're really bold, hit #6 on your phone to unmute your line, or if you're inside the WebEx app, there's a little red microphone icon that you can hit to unmute yourself and ask a question live. If you don't have the chat window enabled, there's a little conversation bubble. It's a little icon that you have to click to start or open up the chat window. Okay, so let's see. So we've got a bunch of questions here. Let's start with, is it ever possible to get the print to look exactly like it does on screen?
Okay. So in my opinion, let's back this up. Everybody has their own perception of what two colors are exactly the same. So I can't answer for every particular individual, but in my opinion, yes, I've seen soft proofing setups that I would say that color on that screen is the same color that's being produced on the printing device. So it is possible. You have to, I guess, understand that, there's certain limitations, and also it's how much time, effort, and, in some instances, money you're willing to devote to that. Because, as we talked about, some of the higher end ISO monitors, in order to be able to produce all of those colors that your printer can. And then, it's, as you get, into each percentage looking the same towards, in the high 90s, this 97% looks like the print, this 98, 99, it's kind of exponential in, how much effort you need to put in to get some of that. But in my opinion, yes. In everybody's opinion, maybe not.
Okay, cool. So another question, I deal mostly with customer supplied art. If they design in Swap and my settings convert to Grackle, will that distort their artwork?
So it really depends on the workflow, but that was actually an interesting thing I was thinking about this morning, actually, which was kind of cool. There are, certain rips that are going to, yes, automatically, like I believe Fiery, for example, if you take a swap file and send it through a workflow that has Grackle set to the source, there's some checkboxes, I think, to honor like an embedded profile. But if you don't have those turned on, it is possible, yes, it's going to, kind of move those colors into the Grackle space. So that could definitely happen, yes.
Can you show calibration strategies for digital presses?
I guess I'd have to just ask what this particular question meant by show strategies. I'm not prepared to show any now at this point, but there's, definitely, if we work with your local color consultant, I am sure we could come up with a method of showing you some different strategies for calibration or linearization. Absolutely.
Do you maybe want to say a few words on maybe how often to calibrate and the difference between calibration and profiling?
Sure. So
it goes along those lines.
In my previous life, prior to color management, my preferred method was to calibrate just often. So maybe every day, depending on the equipment. Since being in this world for a bunch of years now, my answer has progressed to calibrate as often as you need to. So with good process control, quality control measures, you can tell when your color's drifted before you do any production run or producing any kind of piece. So you can tell if your machine's drifted, and if it hasn't, then your machine doesn't require calibration. And if it's drifted beyond your expectation or the parameters you've set up, then you do need to calibrate.
Okay, there's a request to show this within Command Workstation, but this is really a little beyond the scope of this session. That might be more of a one-on-one session. So please reach out to John or me. after this session here, once it's concluded, it'll take a few hours for the WebEx system to create a link to this session. The link will automatically go out to everybody who attended. And so that link will come from my email address. So you can just reply to that or go back into the recording if you missed the if you missed my intro. My contact information was in the beginning. John had his as well. So for those kind of things, please reach out to us directly. Okay, what is Jonathan's opinion of profile adjustments not in Adobe, say in Corel or Corel?
Yeah, so CorelDRAW is something I haven't used in many, many years, but at last viewing, I believe it did have swap as a source CMYK profile. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say they haven't removed any of those features. I'm not even sure what version of CorelDRAW exists at this point anymore, or if any new ones do even exist. And that's not to sound like an Adobe snob. I just haven't messed around with it in recent years. So I would say the color management, as long as it's still there, you're going to be able to color manage your document in Corel. As long as those features are there, no problem.
Okay, cool. How do I create the Grackle CMYK in Illustrator?
Okay, so yep, so I see this question actually in chat when it says I don't see it in my Illustrator. So that, I believe Grackle 2013 isn't loaded in there by default, but if there's a directory that Illustrator and Design Photoshop look in. If you just Google that, I don't remember it off the top of my head. If you just Google the directory for those color spaces, you can download there's a couple different flavors of Grackle. You can get it through ID Alliance. So if you've never been on ID Alliance's website, idalliance.org. And from here, somewhere in here, you can get a whole bunch of standards beyond just Grackle, but all the Grackle color spaces are in here. You could download them. Like I said, Google where that directory is. It's going to be a little different for Windows or Mac, but throw it in there, and then you should have access to it.
Okay, great. Can the printed color vary if the same file is sent from different versions of the Adobe suite?
It can, but that would be due to different color settings options selected. As long as your color settings are consistent, you shouldn't have any problem.
Okay, so maybe if somebody got a new computer and there's a different version of it, maybe with different default settings, then you might need to check it out.
Going back to, I want to say maybe as far as like CS4 that I remember, these settings have definitely been in there. And when I mean that, I know the CMYK source and RGB source has been there longer. But I mean, just things like it being able to give you a warning if you open a different color space than what you're currently set to. They've been in there for a while. But that's, yeah, you shouldn't have any problem with that as long as everything's set consistently.
Okay, cool. There's some more. We tell our customers to save their files as press quality PDF. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so actually, press quality PDF is something I use myself sometimes. Let's go in here and take a look at it. I believe under output, yep. So right here, you're going to want to include, profiles. So that would be fine. And I mean, you don't have to. It's going to keep your Grackle color space or whatever it is, swap color space regardless. But I believe you've got to have include destination profiles if you want somebody on the receiving end of that file to be able to open it up and find out what it was created in. So here, for example, I'll just show you because I know this works for the PDF X4. But if I'm just going to save this as PDF, I'm going to come in here and here and grab it. If I'm now somebody in pre-press, if I just go in and open my output preview, it tells me what the output intent was. So Grackle 2013. So I know this file was created in that. If I were to save this file without embedding the profiles in it, when I open this, it's going to show a simulation profile, but it's going to show whatever my machine is defaulted to. So in that case, Grackle. So the only time you know it's been included, at least with this method, it's with this output intent. As long as that's there, you know that's somebody has that embedded properly in there. Where that helps.
Okay, cool. I think this goes back to the screen that you just had open. The question is, preserve numbers or not, advantage and disadvantages. Does it impact total ink coverage when converting?
So preserve numbers. So that's when you're basically when you're importing something from a different space into your color space. You typically don't. It really depends on what you want to do. So if you, I'm trying to think of how I can maybe illustrate this to not sound so wordy. It's going to depend on different things. I would, Toby, if we could get maybe that person's email, I'd like to do a follow-up on that question, if possible.
Could you open when the settings where it says ask for profiles when open? I think the settings for black point compensation.
We're talking about it here.
Oh no, in the color management settings. Yeah, those are the profile mismatches and missing profiles.
Yes. You want me to go through them, or?
Yeah, just if you just mention real quick what it's for and why it's important.
Yep. So by default, and again, I believe this. It could be different. It could have been changed in any one of the various patches that have come out. But by default, these are set to off. So if I'm set to my Grackle color space, especially if you folks out there are going to be messing around with, changing your default color space from swap, other people might be sending you swap artwork. So without these warnings, it's going to open that swap and it's going to convert that color to my Grackle color space. So it's going to perform a little bit of a shift. And again, it's minute, but it's there. And the more if we send it to somebody else's computer, that may be back to swap and then back to Grackle, you can have a lot of headaches. So I always recommend turning these on. Because what it's going to do is no matter if I'm pasting, if I'm opening, if it's got the profile or not, it's going to ask me what I want to do. Do I want to convert it to my Grackle color space? In some instances, I'm going to want to. In other instances, I'm not going to want to. I'm going to want to keep it in their original intent. And unfortunately, that's not just a blanket answer to say, always convert it to your space or always don't. It's really going to depend on that individual piece and what the expectations are.
I think we have a somewhat related question too now. What is the best method of rendering intent?
There's no best, but I don't believe you can here. In Photoshop, though, you can see there's something called assign profile and convert to profile in Photoshop. And you can actually mess around with those rendering intents. So that's, forgive me if this is not the case, but I believe Dennis is going to be covering this in the 5 C's webinar that we're doing, what these different rendering intents are. But again, there's no best one, but there is the right one for the job. But keep in mind that, this really has to do with, if you need an absolute white point, if you don't want the white point simulated, and how you want to map in colors that are out of gamut, because ultimately those colors do get printed somehow, and you get a little determination over how those are done. So lot of thoughts on that. No right one for every job, but learning what those are can go a long way to helping you on the production end of things.
Great. Okay, we're right on top of the hour. I think that there's one more question actually. I think we have another minute to cover that. Should I keep the RGB setting to Illustrator's default once I get the Graco profile downloaded?
So I think the RGB is, by default, is sRGB. Yeah, that's a great place to start, and that's what I have used for many years. It was only just recently, and it's not for all instances that I'm actually using my monitor's color space. But just that's for some other benefits. By all means, if I was just doing web work or producing graphics to be displayed on emails, that sort of thing, I would be using sRGB, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Okay, there are a few more last second or past second questions that came in. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today, but we'll get back to you for anyone who asked a question that we couldn't answer today. I'm also going to go back through the chats to make sure we didn't miss any. Thank you very much for attending. I hope this was informative and entertaining, and we're able to give you some useful pointers to hopefully make things a little bit more streamlined. And like John mentioned in the beginning, the color management chain, the communication to help you maybe see things from a different angle a little bit. If you get a chance, we're hosting 2 different sessions next week, all things G7. That's all about the G7 master printer qualification and G7 certification. And what we call the 5C color challenge. John mentioned that Dennis is going to be hosting those. The 5C color challenge is all about color management fundamentals. So really things like rendering intents. When do you calibrate? How often do you calibrate? What's the difference between calibration and profiling? So really the color management fundamentals. If you haven't signed up for those yet, then please do. You can reuse the link that you used to sign up for the session that you're on right now. Just reuse the same link, sign up again, and select one of the G7 and the 5C color challenge sessions. If you have any additional questions, or if you really want to get into the weeds with color management, then please reach out to me directly, and I'll connect you with the right color consultant for your region. Or if you happen to write down John's information, feel free to reach out to him directly as well. How do you get a hold of me? In case you missed my intro in the very beginning, I have my email address there, but sometime probably today or maybe tomorrow, you'll be receiving a link from my email address with a recording of this session. You can just reply to that email address as well. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for attending. Have a great rest of the day. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to see you on one of our other color management sessions sometime soon.